Chapter 1. While Ethan Thorne was in his office flirting with another woman, Clara Vance was on the phone, booking him a hotel room. While Ethan was partying at a bar, Clara suggested it was time to go home. He shoved her against a wall, and the crimson blood that stained her white dress was a shocking sight. When Ethan brought a young model to the hotel room door, kissing her passionately without a second thought for Clara standing beside them, he ordered her to stand guard outside and not move an inch. Clara kept her head down, standing respectfully to the side. She didn't react when the girl with Ethan shot her a mocking smile. She was used to it. After 5 years of torment at Ethan's hands, humiliations far worse than this were a regular occurrence. The sounds of lovemaking echoed from the room, loud enough to be heard down the entire hall. Clara didn't wait. She returned to the villa, and the moment she stepped inside, she stumbled against the entryway wall as if all her strength had abandoned her. The wedding photo hanging on the wall fell, its frame scraping a long, bloody gash down her arm. Clara stared at the picture, a dazed look in her eyes. In the photo, she was smiling like a child, while Ethan's face was dark and sullen. She had once thought he was just cold by nature, only later understanding that he would sleep with any woman except her. He had only agreed to marry her because he saw her as nothing more than a gutter dog. He wanted to use marriage to a dog as revenge against his family's arrangements. A phone call snapped her out of it. Clara forced herself to answer. "Clara, I heard about what happened at the hotel. Are you all right?" The old master's hypocritical voice came through the line, followed by a long sigh. "I know you've suffered all these years. That boy Ethan has wronged you. If you could just hold on a little longer, perhaps give the Thorne family a child, he might slowly come to accept." "That won't be necessary." Clara shook her head, a flicker of pain crossing her eyes before it hardened into resolve. Her voice was tinged with bitterness. "Weren't you the one who approved Isabel Croft's return? Mr. Thorne has been self-destructing over her for years. It's time this farce came to an end." Arthur Thorne SR was momentarily speechless, surprised by her directness. He cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed. "Very well. Since you've made your decision, I won't force you. Before you leave, feel free to ask for anything you want." Clara paused for a moment. "I just hope that Mr. Thorne isn't told about my departure." After hanging up, Clara gazed out the window. A bright moon hung in the sky, its silver light spilling across the horizon. Her thoughts drifted back to a night 5 years ago. Her mother had suffered a stroke from years of overwork and needed a large sum of money for life-saving surgery. Fresh out of a prestigious university, Clara had cried, begged, and screamed, but no one was willing to help. Just as she was losing all hope, Arthur Thorne SR, who had brought his grandson to the same hospital for emergency treatment, approached her. He said he could help, but he needed a favor in return. Without a moment's hesitation, Clara agreed to his terms. After that night, her mother had the money for treatment but died anyway when the rescue efforts failed. Clara handled the simple funeral arrangements and then applied for a job at the Thorne family's company. Once hired, she orchestrated a chance encounter with Ethan at the company's entrance and began to pursue him relentlessly. Many had pursued Ethan Thorne, but no one did it with the same shameless, life or death desperation as Clara. To make him smile, she would get on her knees and bark like a dog. To secure an important deal for him, she once downed 2 bottles of hard liquor, ending up in the hospital to have her stomach pumped, nearly dying on the operating table. To save him from a rival's revenge, she had thrown herself in front of him and taken 9 stabs, leaving her on the brink of death. That day, holding a blood-soaked Clara in his arms, Ethan had wept. "Don't die," he'd choked out, his face contorted in grief. "If you wake up, I'll marry you. I'll try to love you." Clara didn't die. She married Ethan Thorne. In the beginning, he was good to her. Her lonely heart began to melt, and she found herself falling in love with him. But 6 months into their marriage, his attitude shifted dramatically, becoming filled with hatred. It was because Isabel Croft, who was abroad, had heard of his marriage and, in a fit of pique, married another man. When Ethan got the news, he raced to the airport like a madman, only to get into a car crash on the way. While unconscious, he kept murmuring, "My dear Isabel, don't leave me." Clara had stayed by his side for 3 days and 3 nights without sleep. When Ethan woke up, he decided it was Clara's fault that he had lost Isabel. If she hadn't pursued him, Isabel would surely still love him. And so, Ethan began to humiliate Clara in every way imaginable. His feelings for Isabel had never changed and, it seemed, never would. No matter how hard Clara tried for 5 years, she could never take Isabel's place. They were childhood sweethearts who had harbored feelings for each other for years. Unfortunately, Isabel's family fell on hard times, and Arthur Thorne Sr., fearing she would drag them down, forcibly separated them and sent her abroad. Devastated by the news, Ethan had slit his wrists in the bathroom. It was on that night of his suicide attempt that Arthur Thorne Sr. met Clara Vance. Then, just recently, the Croft family made a comeback. The old master agreed to let Isabel return to the country, and the implication was clear. When Ethan smashed a wine bottle over his own head and then cavorted with a model right in front of her, Clara knew. She would never be able to complete the task the old master had given her, and she would never find a way into Ethan Thorne's heart. After a 5-year separation, Ethan would soon be reunited with the love of his life. And her contract with Arthur Thorne Sr. was finally coming to an end. It was time to leave. Chapter 2. The night was like a gaping maw, swallowing the small servant's room whole. Clara lay on the bed, still dressed. The anesthetic from treating her wounds earlier in the day was wearing off, and she could no longer fight the exhaustion. She fell into a deep sleep. She didn't know how much time had passed when a basin of ice-cold water slammed into her face, chilling her to the bone. Clara jolted awake, her panicked eyes meeting a pair of fiery ones. Ethan's face was etched with disgust. "Didn't I tell you to wait by the door? Why did you disobey my command?" he said coldly. Calmly, Clara wiped the water from her face without a word. Ethan was about to lose his temper again when he saw the wounds on her body. A complex emotion flickered in his eyes. The cold water had soaked her clothes, and beneath the graceful curves of her body, a broken, scarred canvas was revealed. Faintly, a web of scars was visible, especially the ghastly, crimson gash over her heart. It was a shocking sight. Perhaps remembering the 9 stabs she had taken for him, Ethan's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained cold. "Remember this. If you run off again, I have 1,000 ways to make you wish you were dead." Clara simply nodded, then left the servants' quarters and returned with a bowl of warm sobriety soup. Ethan was lying on his side on the sofa. He lifted his foot, and a basin of perfectly warmed water was placed before him. Clara knelt on the floor, massaging his feet to soothe his meridians. The recipe for the soup was a secret remedy she had paid a high price to obtain. The massage techniques were skills she had spent 2 years mastering under an old master from Yangzhou. Clara always took impeccable care of Ethan, treating him like an emperor. People on the outside said that young Master Thorne had trained himself a fine dog. He found her services useful, so even though he was filled with disgust for her, he couldn't bring himself to throw her away. For once, Ethan didn't continue his torment. His attention was on his phone, a gentle smile playing on his lips as he chatted with someone obviously very important. It was a smile Clara had never seen before, and it felt like a knife twisting in her heart. She stood up with the basin of water. As she passed behind him, she inadvertently glanced at the screen and saw the name. Isabel Croft. Clara understood instantly. No wonder Ethan's mood had improved, no wonder he looked so happy. The woman he loved most had returned. Clara emerged from the servants' room with a document and opened it to the last page for Ethan to sign. Ethan glanced at it, his eyes cold. "I've warned you not to bring company business home. If you can't handle this job, there are plenty of people who would kill for it." Clara kept her head down, her tone flat. "These are divorce papers." Ethan froze, then let out an exaggerated, mocking laugh. He shook his head. You dare to mention divorce? Without me, you're not even as good as a dog." In his mind, Clara was desperately in love with him, the very epitome of a bootlicker in their entire social circle. He didn't believe she had the courage to leave. He grabbed a pen and signed his name with a flourish. Clara picked up the divorce papers, a wave of relief washing over her. She hadn't expected the most difficult step to be so easy. It could only be said that Ethan was too arrogant and looked down on her too much. In truth, if he had just bothered to lift a finger and flip through the pages, he would have known the papers were real. But in his mind, Clara wasn't even worth that small effort. Clara helped the unsteady Ethan into the master bedroom. She was about to speak when he kicked her out of the room. As the door slammed shut, A cold sneer echoed from within. "Get out!" Clara picked herself up from the floor, her face expressionless. She gently patted the dust from her clothes, though the house was spotless, the floors immaculate. She just felt dirty. Everywhere Ethan had touched felt tainted. Whenever Ethan was angry, he would punish her by making her stay in the dark, damp, un-air-conditioned servants' quarters. When his mood improved, he would allow her into the adjacent bedroom to await his orders. As for sleeping in the same bed, ever since the car crash, Ethan would rather be with a model from outside than let Clara touch him. Clara was used to his emotional abuse. She returned to her room and carefully put away the divorce papers. She lay down again, closing her eyes. Even though a tearing pain shot through her wounds, it couldn't suppress her yearning for freedom. 30 days until she was completely free of Ethan Thorne. Chapter 3. At 9 the next morning, Clara woke up after 6 for the first time. She felt weak, her head throbbing. The basin of cold water Ethan had thrown on her last night had caused her wounds to become inflamed, and she was running a high fever. Clara left the servants' room, bracing herself for Ethan's verbal abuse, only to find the villa empty. After searching, the butler informed her that Mr. Thorne had left early in the morning. She nodded. With Ethan gone, she went upstairs to a small room to pack her things. Now that Ethan had signed the divorce papers, all that was left was to pack her bags. There wasn't much to pack. Besides some documents, there were a few sets of clothes and many holiday gifts she had once prepared for Ethan. For 5 years, Ethan had tormented Clara, demanding a unique gift for every holiday. Clara had thought he was giving her a chance, so she had poured her heart into each one. The joke was that it was just another one of his methods of humiliation. Ethan wouldn't even glance at the gifts, tossing them instead to the dog in the yard. His mocking expression seemed to say that in his eyes, there was no difference between her and a dog. In the first 6 months of their marriage, they had been relatively happy. Clara had deluded herself into thinking that if their marriage continued like this, it wouldn't be so bad. But it was all a dream. From the very beginning, she should have distinguished between repaying a debt of gratitude and marriage. Fortunately, it wasn't too late. She packed her belongings and stored them in the servants' room. All the gifts and items related to Ethan filled several large bags, all of which she threw into the trash. Just then, a red Ferrari pulled up to the door. Ethan leaned out, his eyes landing on her, and his expression soured. "What are you throwing away?" Clara's face was blank. "Just some useless trash." Ethan caught sight of the beautifully wrapped gift boxes in the trash can, which looked anything but trash. He was about to scold her when a cough from behind him immediately diverted his attention. "My dear Isabel, are you all right?" Ethan's face changed dramatically, his concern palpable. He gently opened the car door and helped a delicate, beautiful girl out of the car. Clara looked her over with curiosity, thinking to herself that it was no wonder Ethan couldn't forget her. Isabel Croft wore a white dress, her aura pure and elegant, inspiring a sense of pity and affection. Seeing Clara standing there motionless, Ethan erupted in anger. "What are you standing there stunned for? Go get the luggage from the trunk. I don't know what I keep you around for. A dog would be more useful than you." Isabel's expression shifted slightly. In a soft, delicate voice, she said, "Ethan, don't be like that. She is your wife, after all. It's my fault. I shouldn't have come here and disturbed you." She then dabbed at her eyes, her expression mournful. Ethan's face darkened. He looked at Clara with disgust and sneered, "I make the rules in this house. She has no right to any opinion." Isabel offered Clara an apologetic smile and murmured, "I'm sorry to intrude." Clara dragged her exhausted body over and managed to pull the luggage out. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over her and she collapsed. Ethan rushed forward, his expression anxious. Clara, thinking he was worried about her, started to get up. "I'm fine." Ethan shoved her aside, a flicker of revulsion in his eyes. "Useless waste," he spat. "You can't even do this one simple thing. If you get my dear Isabel's luggage dirty, don't blame me for kicking you out." Clara sat slumped on the ground, watching as Ethan, who never took care of anyone, carefully helped Isabel into the villa. Her heart, already riddled with holes, felt like it was being torn to shreds. A bitter taste filled her mouth. Her life was probably worth less than the hem of Isabel's dress. "My dear Isabel has just returned to the country and doesn't have a place to stay for now, so she'll be living here. From now on, you don't need to go to the office." Stay home and take care of her. As Clara stumbled into the villa, she heard Ethan issuing commands. He didn't notice her flushed face or her weak steps from the high fever, rattling on about the specific ways Isabel needed to be cared for. Seeing him dote on Isabel like this, Clara wanted to ask him a question. Making your nominal wife stay home to serve as a maid for the idealized woman in your heart, Ethan, have you no shame? But the thought that she would soon be free of this prison kept her silent. Clara didn't argue, she just walked calmly into the kitchen. Ethan watched her go, a strange feeling stirring within him. Something about Clara's reaction felt off. She was always quiet, but she would at least show some emotion. Today, her calmness was unsettling, but the thought was fleeting. Ethan chalked it up to his own success in taming her. He had just been worried she wouldn't be able to process the situation and would cause a scene, upsetting Isabel. This was much better. Clara first prepared a bowl of mulberry leaf soup. As she carried it out of the kitchen, passing Ethan and Isabel who were laughing and talking, a foot suddenly shot out. Whether it was intentional or not, Isabel tripped her. The soup and Clara went flying. Ethan screamed, pulling Isabel into his arms before glaring furiously at Clara. Isabel looked panicked, apologizing profusely before clutching her head as if in great pain. Clara's head was spinning, and she was losing consciousness. The scalding soup spilled onto her arm, raising a swath of blisters, but she felt no pain. Before she passed out, she saw Ethan rush forward and kick her viciously, spewing all sorts of vile words. Worried that Isabel had been frightened, Ethan took her to the hospital to see a psychiatrist. He left Clara, covered in injuries, to die on the cold floor. As her eyes slowly closed, Ethan's figure faded away, and with it, the last vestiges of that inexplicable emotion she once held for him were utterly extinguished. Chapter 4. Clara woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed, feeling much more clear-headed. The doctor informed her that long-term sleep deprivation had caused a hardening of her arteries, and combined with an unrelenting fever, it had led to her collapse. If she had been brought in any later, her life would have been in danger. Young lady, making money is important, but you have to take care of your body. Clara managed a bitter smile. She didn't argue, just offered a quiet thank you. For 5 years, she had lived in hell, enduring Ethan's torment from morning till night. It was a miracle she was still alive. She learned from the doctor that it was the butler who had brought her to the hospital. He had called Ethan several times, but Ethan's only response was to tell him not to bother him with such trivial matters in the future. If she wanted to die, she could die outside. Just don't dirty the villa and offend Isabel's eyes. The doctor had never met such a cold-blooded and heartless family member. He looked at Clara with nothing but sympathy. Clara sat on the bed in a daze. It was obvious Isabel had tripped her on purpose, yet Ethan had turned a blind eye, instead verbally abusing her and leaving her at home to die. Even if they had signed divorce papers, no human being deserved to be treated like that. Well, those days were almost over. Soon, she would be leaving to live her own life. She had lived in the city for 5 years, without any friends or family. From the day she agreed to repay her debt, it was as if she had sold herself to the Thorne family, becoming Ethan's slave for 5 long years. Clara did have regrets, but in the first 6 months of their marriage, Ethan had actually been kind. The day she took those stabs for him, his tears had fallen on her face as he cried, "Don't die. If you live, we'll get married. I'll try to love you." At that moment, Clara had felt it was all worth it. It was a pity that the life that followed was like hell. Clara stayed in the hospital for another 4 days to recuperate. She had planned to stay until the divorce cooling-off period was over, but the hospital's strict discharge policy, coupled with a call from Ethan ordering her home immediately, forced her to leave. After being discharged, on the way back, Clara finally had time to scroll through her social media feed. It suddenly dawned on her why Ethan hadn't called once in the past 7 days. He had been taking Isabel on a scenic tour. The background of the photo was a full moon, their hands forming a heart shape. The caption read, "So glad to have you for the rest of my life." Ethan made no effort to hide his love for Isabel, seemingly eager to announce to the world that she was his true partner. However, to protect Isabel's reputation, he had deliberately kept their faces out of the picture. Below were endless likes and compliments. The commenters were all Ethan's brothers and friends. They were the ones who looked down on Clara the most, often joining in on the torment and humiliation. Clara was numb to it by now. When she returned to the villa, she saw Ethan and Isabel sitting shoulder to shoulder on the sofa, watching TV and discussing some inane plot. Ethan used to hate trashy TV dramas, saying that those clueless commoners could never understand the lives of the rich. But now, chatting with Isabel, his face was full of happy smiles. It turned out that all of Ethan's principles could be bent for Isabel Croft. When Ethan saw Clara, he frowned, as if her presence was an intrusion on their private world. He was about to lash out, but then he seemed to remember something. "The butler said you were sick that day. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Clara shook her head. "It came on suddenly. I'll be more careful next time." Ethan frowned. "If you're not feeling well next time, say so. If it weren't for you, my dear Isabel wouldn't have been so frightened. Be more mindful in the future." Clara lowered her head, a bitter taste in her mouth. So, Ethan was only worried that her illness would prevent her from taking proper care of Isabel. Ethan took a gift out of a bag and tossed it at her feet, a gesture of charity from on high. "This is for you. Consider it a reward for taking care of Isabel from now on. And," he paused, his tone displeased, "apologize to her. Her mental state is already fragile. If I hadn't gotten her to the hospital in time, she might have suffered permanent damage." Clara froze. She finally understood why Ethan was being so agreeable. It was all to please Isabel. Isabel, however, waved her hand nervously. "It was all my fault. It has nothing to do with Mrs. Thorne." She put in a few good words for Clara, and only then did Ethan let the matter drop. When Ethan went upstairs to change for dinner with Isabel, the look of fragility on Isabel's face vanished in an instant. Her eyes locked onto Clara. A chill ran down Clara's spine. Such a malevolent gaze didn't seem to belong on the face of Ethan's pure, innocent Isabel. Isabel glanced upstairs and sneered. "Clara Vance, you've been a stand-in for 5 years, enjoying a life of luxury that doesn't belong to you. You should be satisfied. If you know what's good for you, get lost." Clara remained silent, so this was Isabel's true face. Chapter 5. Isabel sized up Clara, shaking her head in derision. "A gutter snipe will always be a gutter snipe, dreaming of climbing into high society on the Thorne family's coattails. You were nothing but a toy for Ethan when he was bored. You should know your place." Clara responded faintly, "If you're so confident in Ethan's love for you, why not just wait?" Isabel's face flickered, her eyes turning cold and sinister. Clara was unfazed. "Don't worry, I'm no longer interested in Ethan. I sincerely wish you both happiness. I'll be leaving soon enough." Isabel scoffed. "You think you can just let go? According to my investigation, you became an orphan after your mother died. The only reason you chased after Ethan like a dog was for his money. Don't act all righteous. My return simply ruined your little plan." Clara couldn't be bothered to explain. Seeing that Clara dared to ignore her, Isabel grew furious, her eyes glinting with malice. "Just you wait. I'll show you that in Ethan's heart, you'll never compare to me, whatever." Clara had spent 7 days in the hospital and had already come to terms with everything. As long as it didn't interfere with her quiet departure, she wouldn't have a falling out with Ethan. But who did Isabel think she was? There was no need to placate her. She didn't even want Ethan anymore. She certainly didn't care about his new flame. Just out of the hospital, Clara hadn't fully recovered and was walking with difficulty. As she headed for the servant's room, she ran into Ethan coming down the stairs. Their eyes met. When Ethan saw her pale face and her unnervingly calm gaze, a sudden wave of panic washed over him for no reason. Isabel was back. He could finally be with her. He should have kicked Clara out without a second thought. But for some reason, a voice in his head held him back. He figured it was because he had grown accustomed to Clara's care. Whether at the company or at home, he never had to worry about a thing. That must be why he was reluctant to throw her away. During the days Clara was in the hospital, Ethan felt like something was missing from his life, though he couldn't put his finger on it. It was only now that he noticed the gauze on her arm. He was about to offer some sort of explanation when footsteps approached from outside. A group of friends arrived at the villa, bearing gifts. Ethan's eyes lit up. He swallowed the words he was about to say and hurried to greet them. Clara finally understood. The reason Ethan had called her back was to prepare food and drinks for a party, to serve them. She showed no sign of dissatisfaction, moving through the crowd like a servant. Ethan's friends made no attempt to hide their contempt, mocking her for being willing to be a dog for money. Clara didn't argue, letting them humiliate her as she mentally counted down the days until she could leave. Under Ethan's direction, the villa's garden was transformed into something out of a fairytale castle. To please Isabel, Ethan had gone all out. Clara had never seen him put so much effort into anything. Numbly, she followed his orders, watching the two of them flaunt their affection as his friends cheered for them to link arms and drink a celebratory toast. Isabel smiled, not refusing, seemingly agreeing that it was the proper thing to do. But Ethan's reaction, surprisingly, was to first glance over at Clara. He didn't know why, but he felt a sense of panic. This was what he had dreamed of, so why was he hesitating? His friends noticed his hesitation and turned their attacks on Clara. Some people just have no self-awareness. Now that the original is here, the stand-in should know when to get lost. She has no idea what Ethan has done for Isabel. He would even die for her. Who could possibly break a bond like that? Trying to cling to power with some sordid status will only end in disappointment. Isabel and Ethan are a match made in heaven. The one who isn't loved is the third wheel. Ethan, just kick her out. She's an eyesore. Ethan's circle launched a volley of personal attacks against Clara, their words sharp and cruel. They expected her to get angry, to give them a chance to laugh at her expense like they always did. But Clara's expression remained calm. She didn't argue or fight back. She simply turned and walked towards the kitchen. Ethan frowned. As he watched Clara turn and walk away, an inexplicable pang of fear struck him. He had the strange feeling that if he listened to his friend's advice, he would lose something incredibly important. In the end, he didn't drink the toast with Isabel. Instead, flustered and agitated, he left the scene. The smile on Isabel's face vanished. She stared at Clara in the kitchen, her eyes burning with intense resentment. She had waited 5 long years for this day. When her family went bankrupt, the Thorne family's support could have saved them, but Arthur Thorne Sr. had forcibly separated them and sent her abroad. This time, her family was finally back on its feet, and the old master no longer objected. But Ethan's attitude towards her had somehow shifted. Isabel would absolutely not allow this to happen. Just then, Clara walked past with a trash can. A cold glint flashed in Isabel's eyes. She put on a smile and approached her. "Clara, I'm so sorry. They just like to joke around. Ethan and I aren't really in the kind of relationship you think." Before she could finish, she let out a cry and fell against Clara, grabbing her arm tightly and pulling them both towards the barbecue pit. Chapter 6. Isabel screamed deliberately, her entire body pressing down on Clara. In a voice only the two of them could hear, she hissed, "Do you believe me now? Even if I did this on purpose, Ethan will only blame you." Clara hadn't expected Isabel to be so vicious. Her body, still recovering, was no match for Isabel's strength. A searing pain shot through her back, nearly causing her to faint. The people around them quickly pulled Isabel to her feet. Though she wanted to continue tormenting Clara, she put on a look of panic and guilt, apologizing profusely while shooting Clara a triumphant glare. Clara was in too much pain to speak. Not a single person cared if she lived or died. With all her might, she crawled out of the fire pit and stood there, swaying unsteadily. What happened? Just then, Ethan returned to the scene. When he saw the crowd gathered around Isabel, his face changed drastically. "Who did this?" he roared. Isabel had only singed the sleeve of her dress, but to Ethan, it was as if she were on her deathbed. He was beside himself with worry. Everyone immediately pointed at Clara. It was her she was jealous of Isabel and pushed her into the fire. "What a vicious heart, Ethan. You can't let her get away with this. I can't believe you've been keeping such a venomous dog in your house. Get rid of her. If she dares to harm Isabel now, she might bring disaster to the Thorne family later. You can't keep her." Ethan's friends, who had clearly seen Isabel frame Clara, twisted the truth, sucking up to the powerful and trampling on the weak. Their maliciousness was sickening. Why? Ethan spun around, his eyes locked on Clara, blazing with a furious rage as if she were his mortal enemy. "The Thorne family has taken care of you for so many years, you ungrateful wretch." Clara's head swam. The searing pain in her back had numbed her nerves. All she saw was a sea of accusations, angry shouts, mockery, and hatred. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain that she had been framed, but no words would come out. Ethan strode forward and slapped her hard across the face. "I'll deal with you when I get back. My dear Isabel, are you all right?" Ethan held Isabel, his expression frantic as he checked her from head to toe, his face a mask of concern. "I'm taking you to the hospital. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault for not paying attention, for giving her the opportunity." Surrounded by a fawning crowd, Isabel was whisked away to the hospital. As she left, she looked back at Clara, her eyes filled with contempt. Clara's body felt disconnected from her soul, the pain so intense she couldn't even make a sound. The force of Ethan's slap, combined with the fury in his eyes, was like a heavy hammer, relentlessly pounding on her heart. The pain was unbearable. Clara could no longer stand and collapsed to the ground. When she woke up, she found herself in a hospital bed, being treated by the same emergency room doctor. The doctor sighed, gave her some instructions, and left. She had called Clara's family, only to find Ethan's attitude even worse than before. He had simply told her to let the patient die. In her many years of practice, the doctor had seen her share of bizarre family members, but she had rarely encountered anyone as cold and heartless as Ethan Thorne. Clara had burns on her back. If it weren't for the thick clothes she had been wearing, her entire back would have needed skin grafts. But the injuries were severe, and she spent over 10 days in the hospital before the wounds began to heal. New injuries piled on top of old ones. Throughout her stay, Clara simply stared out the window, her eyes fixed on an unopened flower bud in the courtyard. The day before her discharge, Arthur Thorne SR came to visit, his expression full of regret. Initially, the old master had only hoped Clara could help Ethan get over his heartbreak. But as Clara demonstrated her extraordinary business acumen, not only solving many of the company's difficult problems, but also taking excellent care of Ethan, he had grown to appreciate her. She was the perfect wife for a wealthy family. It was a pity his own grandson was so foolish, so obsessed with love that he would cast aside someone as wonderful as Clara for that invalid. The old master could do nothing but acquiesce. "Clara, it's my fault for not managing Ethan better. I've wronged you." The old master sighed, hesitating. Clara shook her head, saying nothing, her gaze still on the flower bud outside. Arthur Thorne SR leaned on his cane, concern written on his face. "You'll be leaving soon. Have you decided where you'll go?" "If you need any help, I will." Clara pulled her gaze back, forcing a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne, but I have a place to go." Perhaps out of guilt, Arthur Thorne SR asked again, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Clara was about to speak when her eyes suddenly lit up. The unopened flower bud, as if answering a call, miraculously bloomed. Her mood lifted instantly. It was like her own life. For 5 years, she had been in hell, and now, finally, she could see a new dawn. Her eyes shining, Clara's voice softened. "You don't need to do anything. I just hope that after I leave, you won't tell Mr. Thorne." The old master sighed, resigned. "Very well, leaving, what leaving?" A cold voice came from the doorway. Ethan Thorne walked into the hospital room, his face an icy mask. Chapter 7. Ethan's eyes were filled with suspicion as he stared into Clara's. The old master opened his mouth, about to explain. Fearing a change of plans that would prevent her from leaving, Clara quickly changed the subject. "Is Miss Croft all right?" At the mention of Isabel, Ethan's face immediately darkened. He grabbed Clara's arm. "Because of your jealousy, my dear Isabel suffered a mental shock. She just escaped a painful 5-year marriage and came back to heal, and what did you do to her?" Not noticing Clara's cold expression, Ethan continued, "You're coming with me now. If you want Isabel's forgiveness, this is your chance to atone." Without a thought for the IV still in Clara's arm, he ripped out the needle and began to drag her away. Arthur Thorne SR frowned, thinking his grandson was going too far. He tried to intervene, but Ethan cut him off impatiently. "Grandfather, stay out of this. She owes this to Isabel." Clara couldn't fight back and was thrown into the car. Ethan took her to the company headquarters, where a large crowd had already gathered. Clara looked towards the center of the crowd, and her pupils constricted. A man with a knife was holding Isabel hostage. He looked crazed, ready to kill at any moment. Isabel's face was pale, and she stood frozen, trembling. Ethan pulled Clara through the crowd and shouted at the attacker, "You've got the wrong person, she's my wife, the other one is innocent." Clara froze, her face instantly paling. She finally recognized the man with the knife. He was one of Ethan's enemies. The last time she had taken 9 stabs to save Ethan, nearly dying. But for some reason, the man was back, seeking revenge. A chill ran down Clara's spine. Ethan had brought her here to be a scapegoat. The attacker's eyes shifted between Clara and Isabel. He seemed to recognize Clara and nodded in agreement. Ethan was ecstatic and eagerly pushed Clara forward. Clara felt as if she had been plunged into hell. The attacker's eyes glinted with a cold light. Just as he was about to make a move on Clara, several plainclothes police officers rushed out and pinned him to the ground. The crisis was averted. Clara collapsed to the ground, her body shaking uncontrollably. No one knew the psychological trauma that the previous stabbing had left on her. It was on that day that Ethan had cried and begged her not to die, promising to marry her and try to love her if she survived. After that day, Clara had never regretted taking those stabs for him. But now, for Isabel, Ethan had pushed her forward to die in his place. At that moment, Clara's faith was shattered. She began to regret everything she had done over the past 5 years. Was it worth it? Everyone rushed to comfort Isabel, who seemed to be the natural center of attention. Ethan held her, crying his heart out. Only after he had calmed her down and made sure she was all right did he remember Clara. He turned to look at her, wanting to explain. But he was met with a pair of eyes that were completely devoid of emotion, utterly alien. For some reason, a huge wave of panic washed over Ethan. He had never seen Clara look so cold. On some strange impulse, he walked over to her and began to explain. "Don't misunderstand. I had everything arranged. There was never any real danger. I'm tired." Clara dragged her exhausted body away. She didn't want to see Ethan anymore. She limped away from the crowd. Ethan watched her retreating figure, and the image of Clara shielding him from the knife 5 years ago flashed in his mind. The same place, the same attacker. He remembered clearly that his heart had felt like it had been struck by something, cracking open a small fissure. But that feeling was so distant that it was only now, experiencing it again, that the memory slowly resurfaced. That feeling gradually crept back into his heart. He heard Isabel's distressed cries beside him, but he no longer felt the same urgency as before. As Clara's figure disappeared over the horizon, he was overcome with a sense of loss so profound it shocked even him. Chapter 8. Clara returned to the villa alone. Lying in the dim servant's room, the immense terror she had been suppressing finally erupted. She curled into a ball, shivering uncontrollably. She knew Ethan didn't love her, he even hated her. But she never imagined he could be so heartless. Ethan had only thought of using her as a pawn to save Isabel, never considering that in the moment he pushed her forward, the attacker could have lost his mind and killed her. At that moment, Clara was more certain than ever that if she had a second chance, she would never get involved with Ethan Thorne. 5 years ago, she would have begged on her knees rather than accept help from Arthur Thorne SR. Her mother hadn't survived that night, so the result was the same as if she hadn't been treated at all. But she had paid with 5 years of her life, and she would need the rest of her life to heal the wounds Ethan had inflicted. She regretted it. For the first time in ages, Ethan called her. Clara didn't answer. She just lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. A moment later, she received a text message from him, explaining that the situation hadn't been life-threatening and that he hadn't intentionally sent her to her death. Clara glanced at it, found it utterly laughable, and didn't reply. Worried that Isabel's depression would relapse, Ethan stayed by her side, tending to her every need, just as Clara had stayed by his side without rest after his car crash. It was as if fate had come full circle. Clara had brought this upon herself. She no longer blamed anyone but herself for the choices she had made. The cooling-off period was finally over. The morning sun streamed in through the window. Clara got out of bed and quietly began to pack her things. To her surprise, Ethan came home, and he had even brought a gift. Ethan looked exhausted. The young master who was used to having everything handed to him had been taking care of Isabel all by himself. The irony was bitter. The more Clara had cared for him in the past, the more he had abused himself. Ethan still had that air of superiority about him. He placed the gift on the table. "This is the style you used to like the most." Clara looked at the watch in the box. In the past, she might have been happy, but now she felt nothing. She just wanted Ethan to leave so she could get on with her departure. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I know you've been jealous and angry because of Isabel lately, but things aren't what you think. I'll explain everything to you when I have the time. Clara nodded slightly. She would agree to anything he said, as long as it made him leave. Ethan didn't notice her impatience. Isabel's mental state isn't stable. I've explained it to you, she can't handle any stress. So I need to take care of her for a few more days. You just stay at home. If you want anything, just let me know. He suddenly grabbed her hand, his expression complicated. I was too willful before. I've finally come to understand some things. When I get back, everything will be better. He was about to say more when his phone rang. After taking the call, Ethan looked anxious. He stood up to leave. Isabel is having another episode. I probably won't be back for a few days. Before Clara could react, he hurried out the door and headed for the hospital. Clara's face was blank. She hadn't said a word throughout the entire exchange. After Ethan left, she turned and continued packing. She gathered everything that belonged to her, from the cup she used to the sheets she slept on, and threw it all in the trash. Finally, she picked up their wedding photo, their only picture together. Calmly, Clara cut her own image out of the photo and tore it to shreds. After checking several times to make sure there was nothing left of her in the villa, Clara left a copy of the divorce papers on the table, picked up her suitcase, and walked out of the villa. She glanced back one last time at the place where she had endured 5 years of hellish torment. There was not a trace of sentimentality in her expression. She couldn't wait another moment to escape this prison. She never wanted to see that devil again. From this day forward, Ethan Thorne would no longer be a part of Clara Vance's life. Chapter 9. It was the next day before Ethan finished comforting Isabel and dragged his exhausted body back to the villa. He stepped into the entryway and noticed his slippers weren't in their usual spot. His face darkened. Every time he came home, Clara would have his slippers placed in the most comfortable position. Ethan sat on the sofa, closed his eyes, and gently lifted his feet. He waited for a long time, but the basin of perfectly warmed water didn't appear before him, nor did the soothing foot massage. He opened his eyes, a flicker of impatience in them. Clara Vance, don't make me slap you when I'm this tired, his arrogant voice echoed through the villa, but there was no response. Ethan stood up, grabbed a vase from the table, and stormed towards the servants' room, intending to teach her a lesson. Whenever he was angry or unhappy, he would throw things at Clara. He was confident in his ability to control her. Over the years, he had trained her to be completely obedient. Many people said he had raised a fine dog. But when he kicked open the door to the servants' room, Clara was nowhere to be found. Ethan searched the entire villa, but besides himself, there wasn't another soul. Darkness washed over him like a tide. Ethan tensed, a strange sense of panic rising within him, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger. Had Clara grown bold while he was away for a few days? Ethan felt he had been too lenient with her, allowing her to forget her place. He would have to punish her severely when she returned, or she would become even more defiant. Clara Vance, this is your last warning. If you don't come out now, you can stay out forever. Without me, you're not even as good as a dog. I'll count to 3. Get out here. Ethan's cold voice pierced through the villa. He expected his threats to bring Clara running, but there was still only dead silence. Finally, he realized something was wrong. A flicker of fear crossed his eyes. Clara Vance, if you come out now, I won't punish you. My feet are sore. Come and rub them for me. Ethan looked around, his tone no longer angry but tinged with a hint of concession. This was the most he could do. He thought that by suppressing his temper, Clara would come scurrying back, but the villa was empty, echoing only his own voice. By now, even the slow-witted Ethan knew something was amiss. An indescribable sense of dread washed over him, and he collapsed onto the sofa. Clara Vance, if you have the guts, stay hidden forever. I'll divorce you immediately and let you crawl out of the Thorne family like a dog. Do you hear me? Ethan roared into the empty air. You're choosing the hard way when I find you. It won't be as simple as just locking you up. Fuming, Ethan pulled out his phone. He was about to make a call when he saw a document on the table. It looked familiar. He picked it up without thinking. When he saw the words divorce papers, it was as if a hammer had struck his head and he nearly fell over. Ethan flipped through the agreement, a cold sneer on his face. So, you know how to threaten me now. Very good, you dare to divorce me. "I'll grant your wish right now." He was about to sign the last page, but the pen in his hand froze. He stared blankly at the signature already on the page, a storm raging in his heart. This divorce agreement was already signed and in effect. The pen fell to the floor. Unwilling to believe it, Ethan checked again, but the signature was undeniably his own handwriting, not a forgery. "She actually dared to divorce me." Ethan trembled with rage. For 5 years, he had let her enjoy a life of luxury. A gutter snipe like her couldn't afford such a lavish villa in 10 lifetimes. She didn't appreciate it and was now playing hard to get with him. Yes. Ethan felt that Clara was getting more and more out of control, daring to challenge his authority. He would have to punish her severely when she came home. He would make her understand who the master of this house was. Ethan took a deep breath. He remembered how Clara had been utterly devoted to him for 5 years. It was the ultimate expression of love. Without him, she surely couldn't survive. Her defiance now was probably just jealousy. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. A cold smile appeared on his face. He tore the divorce papers to shreds and threw them in the trash. He wouldn't go looking for Clara. He would wait for her to come crawling back, begging on her knees in the yard. The next day, his group of friends arrived at the villa with Isabel to celebrate her discharge from the hospital. The party was even grander than the last one. As the celebration began, someone called out Clara's name, ordering her to bring them red wine. But after calling several times, Clara, who used to be as obedient as a dog, was nowhere to be seen. "She's getting more and more out of line. Ethan, where's that bootlicker of yours? Make her come out and apologize to Isabel. We let her off easy last time. We can't be so lenient this time." Exactly. A disrespectful servant like that needs to be taught a lesson. Otherwise, she won't understand how deep the waters of high society run. She'll think just anyone can enter our circle. His friends chattered away, discussing how to punish Clara in a way that would amuse them all. Ethan sneered. "She's grown wings. She left behind divorce papers and went into hiding. The Thorne family can't afford to keep such a diva." Everyone's eyes lit up. They quickly pushed Isabel towards Ethan, grinning. "Isn't a divorce a good thing? There's nothing standing in your way anymore. You two can finally be together openly." Then they started to cheer. "Get together, kiss her." Isabel lowered her head, feigning shyness, while secretly observing Ethan's expression, a thrill of excitement running through her. After 5 long years, this day had finally come. She struggled to suppress her excitement. Chapter 10. Ethan suddenly looked up, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He pushed people away, his voice laced with irritation. Quiet, the room fell silent in an instant, everyone looking at him with surprise. As Ethan's friends, they were all too familiar with his marital situation. On the surface, Clara was his wife, but in reality, she was just a dog he could order around at will, and a very good dog at that. They were also well aware of the epic romance between Ethan and Isabel, a legendary love story. It was a relationship everyone had rooted for, but it had come to nothing due to the objections of their elders. Ethan was forced to marry Clara, and a heartbroken Isabel married another man. But now, the conditions were ripe for a reunion. Isabel was long divorced, and Ethan could kick Clara out at any time. Furthermore, Arthur Thornesar no longer objected. They could rekindle their old flame, and everyone would be happy. For 5 years, his friends had bullied Clara, and with Ethan's tacit approval, she had never dared to make a peep, even when her dignity was trampled underfoot. At the last party, they had deliberately twisted the truth to drive her away. They thought that with a little encouragement, Ethan would go along with it and get together with Isabel. But his reaction was unexpected. Instead of agreeing, he seemed angry. For a moment, no one knew what to do. Ethan was also shocked by his own reaction. He didn't know why, but the thought of Clara leaving without a word made him feel deeply uncomfortable. He had also assumed that getting together with Isabel was the natural course of things, but when the moment came, he found himself hesitating. It was a sense of dread and unease that he couldn't put into words. Ethan rubbed his temples. He didn't want to discuss his relationship with Isabel anymore. The image of Clara kept popping into his mind, making him agitated. The crowd took the hint and dispersed, leaving only Isabel and Ethan. Isabel keenly sensed that Ethan's reaction was not what she wanted. A cold glint flashed in her eyes. She had endured 5 years of humiliation to be with him. According to her plan, Clara would eventually be gone, and she would become the mistress of this villa. But Ethan's reaction was unacceptable. That dog Clara was gone, so why was her ghost still haunting this place? Isabel didn't let her negative emotions show. Instead, she put on a guilty expression. Ethan, they were just joking. Don't feel pressured. Clara must be jealous, which is why she ran away from home, but she should be back soon. She deliberately looked sad and regretful, her expression mournful. I wish we could go back to the way things were, when all we had was pure love. She then wiped away a few crocodile tears. In the past, whenever Isabel was unhappy, Ethan would feel a pang in his heart and would do anything to comfort her. But now, his mind was in turmoil. When he sensed Isabel's confession, he instinctively cut her off. Isabel, you just got out of the hospital, you should rest. Isabel stood there, stunned, a look of hurt and sadness on her face, but inside she was seething with jealousy. Ethan felt like he was walking a tightrope, torn between two choices. He wanted to pull Isabel into his arms and comfort her, but another voice in his head held him back. He had never felt so conflicted before. To his shock, Ethan realized that Clara's place in his heart was now on par with Isabel's no. It was even threatening to surpass it. Ethan could no longer control his agitation. He shot to his feet, his eyes cold. Clara Vance, you think you've grown wings, do you? Fine. If you won't come back, I'll drag you back. Don't blame me for being ruthless then. Right in front of Isabel, he called his secretary and commanded, immediately freeze all of Clara Vance's bank cards. Find her and bring her back to me, no matter the cost. With that one command, Ethan mobilized the full force of the Thorne family's connections and began a frantic search. The entire city was turned upside down, causing quite a stir. 3 days passed. Ethan had thought it would be easy to find her, but Clara seemed to have vanished into thin air. No matter how powerful the Thorne family was, they couldn't find a trace of her. Ethan descended into a frenzy, obsessed with finding Clara. In his desperation, he not only ignored Isabel, leaving her alone in the villa, but also neglected his duties at the company. Almost everyone assumed that Ethan wanted to find her for revenge. The matter finally reached the ears of Arthur Thorne SR, who summoned Ethan to the old family estate. Chapter 11. Ethan didn't dare to disobey. His parents had died when he was young, and he had been raised by his grandfather. A deep-seated sense of awe was ingrained in him. Otherwise, he would never have allowed his grandfather to send Isabel away. At the old estate, the old master looked at his haggard grandson and, for once, smiled. Ethan, I hear you're looking for Clara. There's really no need. Isn't it better that she's gone? After all, she served the Thorne family for 5 years. It wouldn't be right for you to seek revenge. Ethan froze, staring blankly at his grandfather, feeling there was a hidden meaning in his words. The old master sighed, a look of resignation on his face. I was too forceful back then. I shouldn't have interfered in your relationship with Isabel. Fortunately, it's not too late. Now that there are no obstacles between you two, we can have the Croft family elders come over to discuss the marriage, can't we? Ethan trembled, looking at his grandfather in disbelief, an absurd thought entering his mind. Grandfather, what are you talking about? I'm not looking for Clara for revenge. The old master sensed that Ethan's reaction was not right. His heart skipped a beat, and a terrible thought occurred to him. He observed his grandson's face. He wasn't joking. The sense of unease in his heart grew stronger. He frowned, his expression turning sour, and he tested the waters. Ethan, since Clara has already left and the divorce papers are signed, your relationship should be over. In recent years, the Croft family has made a comeback. I've been considering your happiness. If you can marry the person you love most, I won't object. Ethan shook his head, unable to look his grandfather in the eye. Grandfather, I never said I wanted to marry Isabel, and I never agreed to divorce Clara. He didn't know how to continue. The turmoil in his heart was suffocating him. The old master's heart sank. His tone became serious. Ethan, tell me honestly, do you love Isabel Croft or not? He just wanted an answer. Ethan instinctively wanted to nod, but for some reason, an unknown force held his neck, preventing him from reacting immediately. He did still love Isabel. That was why he had done so many outrageous things. Despite the blessings he received from others, many were actually laughing at him behind his back. A married man who doted on another woman, even abandoning his principles for her, had long become a topic of gossip. The old master had let Clara go precisely to silence such talk. If they could form a marriage alliance with the Croft family, they could regain some face. You never thought about divorcing Clara. You were willing to die for Isabel, even slitting your wrists. Now that she's back and there are no obstacles between you, shouldn't it be a natural conclusion? The old master's tone was full of disapproval. To fulfill his grandson's love, he had made many compromises. Not to mention that the Croft family's comeback still left them far behind the Thorns. As for Clara herself, the old master was extremely satisfied with her. In 5 years, she had not only brought huge economic benefits to the Thorn family's company, but had also taken impeccable care of his grandson. As someone who had seen it all, the old master knew that he would never find another woman in the world more suitable for the Thorn family than Clara. It was just a pity that Ethan had a one-track mind and didn't know how to cherish her. Because of Isabel's unhappy marriage, he had developed a deep-seated hatred for Clara, tormenting her relentlessly for 5 years. The old master had wanted to intervene several times, but Ethan, blinded by hatred, would only punish her more severely. Any other woman would have run away long ago. Clara's departure was a huge loss for the Thorn family. The old master had accepted it, but from Ethan's attitude, it seemed his feelings for Clara were not just hatred. Things were getting out of control. The old master took a deep breath. He knew he had to make his grandson make a clean break and not repeat the same mistakes. He ordered someone to bring a sandalwood box containing a contract. The old master handed it to Ethan, his expression grave. There's no need to look for Clara anymore. When Ethan saw the large characters for gratitude contract on the document, his mind went blank. With trembling hands, he flipped through the pages, each word like a slap across his face. Grandfather, what is the meaning of this? Even after reading the contract, Ethan looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at his grandfather. His heart felt like it was being crushed by a giant boulder, and his body swayed. The old master gave a bitter smile. There's no point in hiding it from you now. 5 years ago, you tried to kill yourself over Isabel. To help you get over your heartbreak, I hired Clara Vance. She did a very good job over the years. Not only did you recover, but you also successfully took over the company and took it to new heights. Ethan kept shaking his head, his expression flickering between disbelief and despair. He clutched the contract tightly, his eyes welling up with tears that threatened to spill over at any moment. What did the gratitude contract say? After hearing his grandfather's explanation, Ethan refused to believe it. For 5 years, Clara had done so much for him. Was it all just to repay a debt? Ethan knew very well that the love in Clara's eyes for him was not fake. From the first day she pursued him, she had endured humiliation, kneeling on the ground and barking like a dog. To help him relieve stress, she had painstakingly learned massage techniques, becoming like a robot at his beck and call, never showing any fatigue. When he was in danger, she had even stepped forward to fight off an attacker, taking 9 stabs for him and nearly dying. If there was no love in her heart, it would have been impossible for her to do all that. It was precisely because of Clara's unparalleled love for him that Ethan had so recklessly trampled on her dignity. But now, his grandfather was telling him that it was all just part of the gratitude contract. Clara had endured endless torment and had almost been killed, not because of love, but because of a contract. Ethan simply couldn't accept it. He looked up, his eyes red, his voice trembling. Grandfather, tell me this isn't true. If it was all true, then everything Clara had done for him was out of a sense of duty, not a single shred of personal affection. Ethan was on the verge of collapse. Chapter 12. The old master's face was cold, unable to accept his grandson's reaction. His tone was no longer gentle. The facts are right in front of you. Clara was someone I hired. Everything she did was according to the terms of the contract. So, there's no need for you to waste any more time on her. Ethan, I've gone to great lengths all these years to help you get over your heartbreak so you could successfully inherit the Thorn family business. You used to love Isabel so much. Don't tell me you're hesitating now. The old master had invested so much effort into his grandson's happiness. He had thought that after Clara left, everything would go back to normal. But from Ethan's reaction, that was clearly not the case. The entire social circle knew how much Ethan despised and hated Clara, and how many absurd things he had done to her over the past 5 years. Now that she was gone, Ethan was reluctant to let her go. The old master was terrified that Ethan would once again be consumed by love. He said gravely, "As the heir to the Thorne family, you had better forget Clara Vance and focus on being with Isabel Croft." Ethan looked dazed, as if he hadn't heard a word. "Grandfather, can you tell me where Clara went?" The old master suppressed his anger, frustrated by his grandson's stubbornness. "Get a grip. Even if you knew where she was, what would you do? The 5-year contract is over. She has no reason to stay with the Thorne family, do you understand?" Ethan lowered his head, his shoulders shaking violently. He couldn't hear a word his grandfather was saying. All he wanted now was to find Clara as soon as possible and tell her that the truth wasn't what she thought. In fact, after taking Isabel to the hospital, he had wanted to confess to Clara. He had thought she would be waiting obediently at home, but in just a few short days, their relationship had been turned upside down. He still couldn't accept that everything Clara had done for him was because of a contract. But the contract his grandfather had produced was in black and white, detailing every clause, down to what time Clara had to get up to make breakfast, and how she had to become a human shield in dangerous situations. That, combined with his grandfather's solemn expression, extinguished Ethan's last glimmer of hope. He wished so desperately that his grandfather would say it was all a joke. To think that his 5-year marriage had been nothing but a fantasy constructed by others. An endless rage surged through him, consuming his entire being. Ethan tore the contract to shreds and threw the pieces into the air. The tears he had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down his face. The old master gripped his cane tightly, wanting to shout at him, but when he saw the uncontrollable pain on his grandson's face, he let out a long sigh. What a mess he had made. Ethan was an exceptionally capable successor, rarely controlled by his emotions, except for when his relationship with Isabel was broken up, which had driven him mad. Now, Clara's departure had caused Ethan to lose his reason for a second time. A sense of worry began to grow in the old master's heart. If Ethan had truly fallen in love with Clara, things would become very complicated. Ethan knelt on the floor, crying heartbrokenly. "Grandfather, I'm begging you, please tell me where Clara is." The old master closed his eyes and asked in return, "Do you think, after all the harm you've caused her over the past 5 years, Clara would be willing to come back?" He knew Clara's personality well. Once she made a choice, she would never look back. So, from the moment she left, she would have made sure the Thorne family could never find her. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't bring himself to say no. Scenes from the past 5 years flashed through his mind, and his body began to tremble violently. Just then, Ethan received a call saying that something major had happened at the villa, and he needed to get back immediately. Still reeling from the shock of the gratitude contract, Ethan had no choice but to rush back. When he walked into the living room, he saw Isabel being held down on the floor by a group of menacing men. Chapter 13. When Isabel saw Ethan return, her face lit up with joy. As if he were her savior, she grabbed his hand. "They're bad men, they're trying to kidnap me." Ethan's eyes turned icy. He glared at the men, about to speak. The leader sneered and threw a stack of documents on the table. "You must be the young master of the Thorne family. Good timing. Isabel Croft owes us $30 million. She said you'd help her pay it back." Ethan looked confused. He turned to Isabel. "What money?" The man narrowed his eyes, a cold glint in them, clearly displeased. "Isabel Croft, are you playing me?" Isabel's face changed dramatically. She quickly explained, "Just give me a little more time. 3 days is all I need." The man's gaze shifted between the two of them. He didn't press the matter further. As he was leaving, he threw a strange comment over his shoulder. "Young Master Sterling has quite the appetite to be into this kind of tramp." Ethan frowned, his confusion growing. He thought of the $30 million, and his heart sank. A bad feeling began to creep in. Isabel's expression shifted. Seeing Ethan's suspicion, she immediately explained that it was all a misunderstanding, that they had the wrong person. "Ethan, don't you trust me?" Isabel immediately put on a pitiful expression to gain sympathy. "My feelings for you haven't changed in 5 years." In the past, Ethan would have believed her without question, even paying off the $30 million for her, no matter the reason. But since Clara left, It felt as if a large part of his heart had been torn away and a seed of doubt had been planted. Ethan remained wary, but he said it was fine. Isabel breathed a sigh of relief, secretly congratulating herself that Ethan still trusted her as he always had. That would make things easier. After she left, Ethan picked up the documents from the floor. He wished he hadn't. The moment he saw them, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. A wave of intense humiliation washed over him. The documents were filled with photos of Isabel with various older men, her face ecstatic, as if she were enjoying herself immensely. Just one glance made Ethan's stomach turn. He rushed to the bathroom and threw up. He couldn't believe it. This was the woman he had once loved most, cavorting with all sorts of repulsive old men. Ethan felt as if his entire world was collapsing. The feeling of being deceived was like a knife, slowly flaying his soul. It was a long time before Ethan recovered. He immediately sent people to investigate. In just 3 hours, he had the information he wanted. He had been holding onto a sliver of hope that Isabel wasn't that kind of person. But the information his secretary sent over was even harder to accept than the documents. After her family went bankrupt and she was sent abroad, she hadn't worked hard to rebuild her life. Instead, to make money, she had become the plaything of wealthy men, eventually marrying a man in his 50s. After spending all of the old man's money, she had dumped him, causing him to commit suicide by jumping off a building. This had angered his powerful family, and she had been forced to flee back to the country. It was not the tragic story of an abusive marriage that she had claimed. Isabel had been the dream of his youth, the one he could never forget. That was why he had done such crazy, hurtful things to Clara. But now, learning the truth, he realized that Isabel was not his idealized love, but a complete and utter scumbag. Ethan nearly broke down. He remembered what the man had said. Young Master Thorne has quite the appetite. To be into this kind of tramp, Ethan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He collapsed to the floor, all hope lost. He thought of how, for the sake of such a person, he had deeply hurt Clara. He was less than human. Ethan wanted to slap himself. The successive blows had shattered his spirit, and he could no longer maintain his composure. An intense hatred began to fester within him. If Isabel hadn't deceived him, Clara might still be by his side. Ethan suddenly looked up at the second-floor room, his eyes glinting with a cold light. The more he had loved Isabel, the more he hated her now. The cold photographs were like a series of malicious smiles, mocking his years of devotion and punishing him for his mistakes. An endless wave of regret washed over him. Ethan was heartbroken. At that moment, he missed Clara's kindness more than ever. After Isabel returned, Clara's silence must have been a sign of her deep disappointment in him. Ethan knelt on the floor, holding his head in his hands, unable to escape his grief, softly murmuring Clara's name. But the Clara who had loved him so deeply would never come back. Those who trample on a true heart will eventually pay the price. Chapter 14. If Ethan's descent into madness 5 years ago, after Isabel's marriage, was considered a legendary romance in their social circle, then his cruel retaliation against Isabel after Clara's departure became a joke. Arthur Thorne Sr. was extremely disappointed in his grandson's behavior, but could do nothing about it. In the past, Ethan had Clara by his side. Where would he find another Clara now? Isabel's current situation was as miserable as her initial return had been glorious. Outsiders said that Ethan had become hysterical after discovering Isabel was a scumbag who had deceived him. But those who knew the real story understood that it was because of someone's departure that Ethan had been hurt even more deeply than the first time. News of the love-hate saga between Ethan and Isabel reached a small seaside town. It was a coastal town in the southwest. The sun was setting over the horizon, and a moist sea breeze blew in. Clara walked along the beach, holding a drawing board. After leaving the Thorne family, she had bought a random ticket at the train station and come here. As Ethan's personal assistant, she had earned a considerable amount of money over the years, enough to support her for the rest of her life. So she followed her heart, not her career prospects, and became a volunteer teacher. She rented a small courtyard and turned it into a cozy home with her own hands. Every flower and plant in the yard was planted by her, waiting for the warmth of spring and the blooming of flowers. Facing the sea, she yearned for a happy life. When she first arrived, she was plagued by nightmares every night. She dreamt she was locked in an iron cage, facing Ethan's contorted, ferocious faces. Every time she woke from a nightmare, she would sit by the window, gazing at the full moon in the night sky, silently licking her wounds. The scars on her body had healed, but the wounds in her heart would take a long time to mend. Fortunately, during her time as a volunteer teacher, she spent her days with innocent children, and her soul was cleansed, a pilgrimage like redemption that gradually brought her peace. During the day, as a volunteer teacher, she was with the children, looking at their young, innocent faces, and she remembered her past self. Before her mother passed away, she too had been a child. Back then, her mother had wished for her a life of peace, free from disaster and hardship. Fresh out of college, she was full of dreams and aspirations for the future. But a single contract had dragged her into the abyss, where she lived in hell for 5 long years. Even after leaving the Thorne family, even though she no longer saw Ethan, the mental torment still haunted her. Fortunately, the warm sea breeze of the small town and the happy laughter of the children gradually pulled her out of the mire. The Clara of today, though quiet, had rekindled her hope for life. Her mother had no last words, but it was as if she had already told her to live well, to live happily. Clara sat on the beach, watching the sun sink into the sea, silent for a long time. "Do you want to know what's happening with Ethan Thorne?" A gentle voice came from behind her. Clara didn't turn around. She knew it was another volunteer teacher. The seaside town was a place that soothed the soul. Besides Clara, there were several other young people from big cities. They didn't talk much about their pasts. They would occasionally get together, sit around a bonfire, and talk about their uncertain futures. Julian Royce was a teacher from the same city as her, and they had a decent amount to talk about. Clara turned to look at the tall, handsome man standing behind her. He was dressed simply, but his noble aura betrayed his extraordinary background. Clara was wary of men like him. After being hurt, she maintained a high level of vigilance around young masters from wealthy families. Julian didn't seem to mind. He sat down beside her, and they watched the sunset together. After asking his question, he didn't say anything else. They sat shoulder to shoulder, immersed in a subtle atmosphere, but Julian's next words shattered the silence. "Ethan Thorne is looking for you. He's going crazy." Julian turned to look into Clara's eyes, a look of heartache in his own. Hearing Ethan's name, Clara's emotions didn't fluctuate much. It was like a distant memory. She just gave a soft "oh." Julian breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that she wasn't averse to the topic, he began to share what he knew. The news that Isabel had been a rich man's mistress had spread, and her reputation was completely ruined. Unable to bear the blow of being deceived, Ethan had begun to torment her madly. But the two were too deeply entangled, and their past was a legendary romance. Ethan paid off her $30 million debt, but made her sign an extremely unfair contract. Isabel still held out hope for Ethan, believing she could win him back with her sincerity, and she gave her all without hesitation. But it was all in vain. From the beginning, Ethan had only been playing with her and seeking revenge. Everything Clara had once done, Isabel not only had to do, but she had to do more. But Isabel was not one to endure hardship. After a few days, she began to complain incessantly. Instead of showing any sympathy, Ethan only intensified his torment, spending his days either drinking heavily or torturing Isabel. His once beloved, dear Isabel, had become like an enemy. Clara listened calmly, then stood up, brushed the sand off her pants, and walked away. She and Ethan had long since parted ways. From the day she left, his life and death were no longer her concern. Chapter 15. During the day, she was with the children. At night, she sat in her courtyard, enjoying the quiet. Clara grew accustomed to this life and enjoyed it. After her mother's death, she had been like a walking corpse, a tool for the Thorne family, with no time of her own, no life of her own. It was as if from the moment she signed the contract, she had lost herself. So, she cherished this new life all the more. She would personally water the sunflowers she had planted and bring home small trees that had been discarded outside. When Julian talked about Ethan's situation, Clara was completely unconcerned. Ethan's madness was simply the result of the disillusionment of his beautiful love story, which had led to his mental breakdown. He was a perfectionist who couldn't tolerate the slightest flaw in his partner, but he only ever demanded it of others. So, He could hurt Clara without a second thought, claiming it was to mourn his dead love. Now that Ethan was hurt again, there was no other Clara around for him to use as an outlet. That was all there was to it. During her time with Ethan, Clara's powerful business acumen had repeatedly saved the company from disaster, making her a pillar of strength, but everyone thought it was Ethan's achievement. Only a few people who had dealt with her directly knew her true value. Now, Clara had no desire to re-enter the business world. She just wanted to live out the rest of her life in peace. Julian had met her once before and admired her greatly. He had invited her more than once, offering the protection of the Royce family, which was even more powerful than the Thorns. Clara had politely declined, wanting only the company of her flowers and plants. In her spare time, she liked to paint. She had studied art in college and had more talent than many professional students. Over the past month, she had spent her free time sitting on the beach, but her mind would conjure up a different scene. It was as if she could see winter in the heat of summer. And in the cold of winter, she yearned for warmth. Driven by this conflicting psychology, Clara produced many works, which she would casually leave at the school for the children to play with. Someone secretly uploaded her paintings to the internet, and she became an overnight sensation. When someone contacted her and invited her to hold an exhibition, Clara was in the kitchen making soup. She immediately thought of Julian. Compared to business, she preferred creation. During this time, Julian had been trying to get closer to her, but her experience with Ethan made her keep a safe distance from young masters of wealthy families. This exhibition was a good thing. At least she could do something she loved. Clara brought a gift and knocked on the door of the next courtyard. As if he had been expecting her, Julian was already standing in the yard, looking at her with a gentle gaze. Their eyes met, and her long dead heart suddenly skipped a beat. Julian stood amidst a field of sunflowers, like a radiant source of light, emitting a brilliant glow that warmed her broken heart. Clara knew what Julian had been doing for her. When she first arrived in the seaside town, a stranger in a strange land, it was he who had warmly helped her to adapt. Every time she had a nightmare, the sound of reading would come from the next yard at just the right moment, like a beacon guiding her out of the darkness. Julian took special care of her, a level of concern that went beyond that of a normal colleague, not something a young master from a wealthy family would do. He had overturned Clara's perception of the wealthy elite. Now, he was helping her organize an art exhibition, with all the proceeds going to charity. It was only right that she should come and thank him. This was the first time she had set foot in Julian's courtyard. The layout and atmosphere were surprisingly similar to her own. Their artistic tastes, it seemed, had led them down different paths to the same destination. Walking into the courtyard felt like coming home. They sat opposite each other, drinking tea and talking about philosophy and life. Clara had a strange feeling, as if they hadn't just met a month ago, but had known each other for half a lifetime. Julian always knew how to provide emotional support. At that moment, even if Clara were a fool, she would have understood Julian's intentions. She stood up abruptly and made her excuses. Her body and soul were shattered. She was not worthy of him. Julian watched her leave without trying to stop her, his eyes full of pity and heartache. He had wanted to tell her that they had known each other long ago, that she just didn't remember, but that he could never forget that stormy night. Once, Clara had saved his life. Now, he wanted to repay her 100, 1,000 times over. Another month passed like this. Clara took 3 days off to return to the big city she had left. Besides the exhibition, her mother's death anniversary was approaching. When she stepped out of the train station, she saw that the entire exit was covered in rose petals. Clara looked up and saw a slender figure holding a bouquet of flowers, walking towards her with a look of deep affection. Chapter 16. 2 months had passed since she had last seen Ethan. Things were the same, but the people had changed. Ethan stood before her and offered her a bouquet of roses, his eyes welling with tears. "Clara," he said, his voice trembling, "I've been searching so hard for you." The ground was covered in petals, a dreamlike scene. Travelers stopped to watch, their eyes full of envy for Clara. Such a romantic scene was usually only seen in movies. Witnessing it in person, they smiled in blessing. Clara's face was expressionless. She looked at Ethan calmly, her heart completely still. It had taken her 2 months to cleanse herself of the nightmares of the past 5 years. She was no longer the slave who had to obey the Thorne family's every command. Whatever lingering feelings she might have had for Ethan before Isabel's return had been completely crushed by his relentless torment. She had prepared the divorce papers long ago, a constant reminder that her presence in the Thorne family was to repay a debt, not for love. In her courtyard, Clara had had a conversation with herself. She admitted that when they first got married, she had developed feelings for Ethan. Having lost her mother and become an orphan, she yearned for the warmth and care of a family. But Ethan's actions had shattered her love, along with her hope for life. She lived like a walking corpse every day, sustained only by the promise of her contract. Ethan had killed the hopeful, idealistic Clara of the past, pushing her into hell. And now, here he was, with a hopeful expression, staging a grand confession. Clara found it utterly laughable. She could guess what he was thinking. Isabel's image had been shattered, his fairy-tale romance was over, and he couldn't find another woman who would love him as desperately as Clara had. Add to that the whispers of others about how good she had been to him, and he was consumed by guilt. Looking at Ethan's handsome face, Clara felt nothing but disgust. He craved what he couldn't have, and what he had, he cast aside like a worn-out shoe. Who was he putting on this show of belated affection for? Belated affection is worthless. Clara looked at the roses and said calmly, "I've never liked roses." Those were Isabel's favorite. What she liked were the red azaleas she used to see covering the mountains when she went herb gathering with her mother as a child. Ethan's face instantly paled, his eyes filled with panic. His attitude was humbler than she had ever seen. "I'm sorry, I didn't know, I'll go get." Clara shook her head. "Mr. Thorne, we are divorced, please have some self-respect." She paid no more attention to the weeping Ethan and strode forward without a backward glance. Clara only regretted that her whereabouts hadn't been kept secret enough, allowing Ethan to find her and disturb her. She should have taken the bus back. To avoid seeing Ethan again, she had already decided to move her mother's grave. After the exhibition and paying her respects to her mother, she would set her plan in motion. Ethan stood in the rose-petal-strewn exit of the station, tears streaming down his face, his heart pierced with a sharp pain. After searching for 2 months, he had finally seen Clara again, only to be met with her coldness and disgust. He was finally experiencing the pain and hardship Clara had endured. But what was this compared to the harm he had inflicted on her? Ethan watched her figure disappear into the crowd. An invisible barrier now stood between them. There was no going back. He crouched on the ground, sobbing his heart out. Ethan, just then, a pained voice came from behind him. Isabel appeared, her eyes full of adoration and heartache. Ethan shot up, glaring at Isabel, making no attempt to hide the hatred in his eyes. Isabel jumped, startled, and quickly explained. "Ethan, I didn't mean to follow you. That Clara is just awful for someone of your status to create such a romantic confession, and she just ignored it, she should be damned." Ethan erupted in fury. He slapped her hard across the face, then smashed the bouquet of roses down on her. Isabel let out a piercing scream as the thorns dug into her skin, drawing blood, but she didn't dare to fight back. She simply endured it. As she knelt and begged for forgiveness, she looked in the direction Clara had disappeared, her eyes filled with venomous hatred. Chapter 17. Returning to this city brought back mostly painful memories. For 5 years, she had endured a hellish existence that most people could not imagine. Seeing Ethan again, Clara had thought she could face him calmly, but she had overestimated her own composure. At the train station exit, faced with Ethan's confession, her only thought had been to slap him twice. How could Ethan still have the audacity to confess his love? Her silent departure was a matter of basic decency, not because she cared about Ethan's pride. She had once held a sliver of hope for Ethan, thinking that after they married, her husband would be her family. Who would have thought that the person she considered most important would be the devil who pushed her into the abyss? In the cemetery, Clara stood before her mother's grave and told her everything that had happened, her voice soft and choked with emotion. Since her mother's death, she had been an orphan, with no one left to love her. Loneliness and pain had been the central themes of her 5-year marriage, suffocating her. Now, finally free, breathing the fresh mountain air, Clara was filled with emotion. At least life in the seaside town was peaceful. "Mom, I'm going to settle down there. I'll take you with me." On the anniversary of her mother's death, Clara hadn't had anyone to confide in for a long time. Only the kind smile on the black and white photo on the tombstone brought her comfort. Clara sat before the grave, talking to herself for a long time. A light rain began to fall, blurring the landscape. Clara sensed footsteps and turned to see, her brow furrowing, her face a mask of undisguised disgust and anger. Ethan, holding an umbrella, walked up to her and said quietly, "It's raining." Clara stared at him coldly. "What are you doing here?" She didn't want Ethan's presence to defile her mother's resting place. Ethan's face paled. He wrung his hands anxiously. "Clara, in the 2 months you've been gone, there hasn't been a moment I haven't thought of you. You did so much for me, suffered so much. Every time I think about it, I feel like I'm not human. It was only after you were truly gone that I slowly realized who I care about most. Clara, please come back. I can't bear life without you. Let's forget the past and start over." Ethan mustered his courage and tried to take her hand, but she violently shook him off. Clara laughed, a humorless sound. "Mr. Thorne, we are divorced. Do you understand? Listen to yourself. After I left, you couldn't bear it. It's just that you lost a loyal dog, isn't it? No one else will be your slave like I was. Forget the past and start over? Look here," she said, pointing to her heart, a cold smile on her face. "This heart is already broken, trampled into 1,000 pieces by you. Just because you felt you had wronged Isabel, you spent 5 years tormenting me. Do you really think we can just move past that? The only person you truly love is yourself. You've never loved anyone else. So don't perform this act of belated affection for me. It makes me sick. Mr. Thorne, from the day the contract ended, I swore I never wanted to see you again. Because I hate you, I detest you." A flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a clap of thunder. The color drained from Ethan's face. His body swayed as he stared in disbelief at the woman before him, his former wife. He could feel the deep-seated disgust and anger emanating from her. He knew he had hurt her deeply, but he never imagined the wound would be so profound. Clara's words left him unable to utter a single rebuttal, because it was all true. Ethan shook his head, tears mixing with the rain on his face. He fell to his knees, repeatedly murmuring, "I'm sorry." Clara disgustedly threw aside the umbrella he was holding over her head and strode away. She felt tainted. She left Ethan kneeling before her mother's grave, weeping heartbrokenly, the kind face in the black and white photo looking down at him with cold indifference. As Clara left the cemetery, she received a call from Arthur Thorne SR. She frowned, hesitating, but remembering that he had once helped her, she reluctantly answered. Arthur Thorne SR wanted to meet in person. Clara took a deep breath. She had a feeling she knew what he wanted, but she didn't back down. In fact, she felt it was necessary to make things clear. Chapter 18. In the old Thorne family estate, the old master looked at the well-behaved girl sitting before him, his heart filled with regret and sorrow. To be honest, in her 5 years of marriage to his grandson, Clara had done everything right. The business acumen she displayed, her loyalty to the Thorne family, and the excellent care she took of Ethan were all remarkable. Any one of those qualities would have been impressive on its own. What's more, she had fulfilled every requirement the Thorne family had set for her. She was, without a doubt, the most outstanding young person he had met in decades. It was just a pity about her background. If only she had come from a wealthy family, she and Ethan would have been a perfect match. In a moment of misjudgment, seeing the Croft family's resurgence and his grandson's obsessive love for Isabel, the old master had decided to let Clara go. But he had misjudged them. The Croft family's comeback was built on a mountain of debt, and they could go bankrupt at any moment. And Isabel herself was a scumbag who had sold her body for money abroad. The old master would not allow such a person to marry into the Thorne family and tarnish their name. Seeing Clara again after 2 months, the old master liked her more and more. In comparison, Clara was 100 times better than Isabel. After a few pleasantries, the old master quickly steered the conversation to Ethan, hinting that he hoped she would give him another chance. "Ethan, I've watched him grow up. He can be stubborn, but he's a good person. He just doesn't know how to express his love. After you left, he was hurt even more deeply than the last time, which shows you're in his heart. Since you two have a 5-year history and no irreconcilable differences, why not give each other another chance?" The old master smiled, his tone kind, but his words were cold and cruel. Clara didn't argue. Instead, she took out a document she had prepared and respectfully placed it in front of the old man. The old master glanced at it, a look of confusion on his face. Clara looked up and met his gaze directly. This was the first time she had spoken to him as an equal. "Mr. Thorne, these are my achievements while working for the Thorne family company. I've earned the family no less than $100 million over the years. And what was my reward? Ethan locked me in a closet for 3 days, and I nearly died in there." The old master's face changed drastically. He was about to explain, but Clara didn't give him the chance. "There is also a check for $3 million, which covers the medical expenses you paid for my mother, plus interest." The old master frowned, displeased. "What is the meaning of this?" Clara said faintly, "I thank you for your kindness 5 years ago. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't have even had the chance to go into surgery. Although she still passed away, she always told me to be down to earth, to repay kindness, but also not to wrong myself." "Goodbye." Clara stood up. She didn't want to argue with the old master. She simply left. She had said what needed to be said. She had done what needed to be done. She had come to the Thorne family estate to sever all ties with them and return to her own life in the seaside town. "Stop!" The old master's face was grim, a fire of anger burning in his heart. He stared at Clara, his eyes glinting with a cold light. At that moment, the authority of the head of the family was on full display. He was no longer the agreeable old man. A group of bodyguards rushed into the living room and surrounded Clara. Clara's face darkened. Perhaps she should have expected this. A selfish person like Ethan couldn't have been raised by a kind and reasonable man. Julian was right. There wasn't a single good person in the Thorne family. Ethan's heartbreak was his own doing, yet they had made an innocent person pay the price. There were many ways to repay a debt. If she had gone out and worked, she could have quickly paid back the Thorne family with interest. But the old master had insisted she give up everything to be the sacrificial lamb for Ethan's heartbreak. She had lost her time, her life, herself. She had become a slave and a tool for the Thorne family. The old master doted on Ethan too much. He only cared that his grandson not be ruined by a little thing like love. He didn't care if her life was ruined. Now that his soft approach had failed, he was trying to force her to stay and continue to be the Thorne family's slave. A surge of anger rose in Clara's heart. She was not afraid. Even if she died in the Thorne family estate, she would not stay. The old master leaned on his cane, his eyes filled with a cold threat. "No one can defy my will. Many people would kill for a chance to get close to the Thorne family, yet you are ungrateful. If you don't give me an explanation today, don't even think about leaving here." With a single command, he could have Clara killed, and no one would seek justice for her. Just as the impatient old master was about to give the order, hurried footsteps were heard from outside. Another group of people stormed into the old estate. At their head was Julian Royce. Chapter 19. In the end, wary of the Royce family's power, the old master did not make things difficult for Clara. After leaving the old estate, Clara sat in the car, silent. She had underestimated the cold-blooded cruelty of the wealthy. The old master's willingness to stoop so low for his grandson had destroyed the last shred of respect she had for him. Julian didn't speak. He just sat beside her, a quiet companion. He had known the Thornes were up to no good, which was why he had brought his men to rescue her. He gave her time to calm her emotions. Looking at the pain-etched face beside him, Julian's heart ached. He wished he could take her suffering upon himself. The harm the Thorne family had inflicted on Clara was far too deep to be healed in just 2 months. In the seaside town, Julian had often sat by the wall, listening to the agonized cries coming from her room, his heart feeling as if it were being slowly sliced by a dull knife. Fortunately, he had arrived in time, and Clara was unharmed. Clara was truly grateful to Julian. From his care for her in the seaside town to his willingness to turn against the Thorne family for her, it seemed to go beyond mere appreciation for a normal person. In Julian, she felt a sense of being valued that she had never experienced before. But why? Clara didn't believe her own charisma was enough to make the scion of a powerful family act so irrationally. There had to be another reason. She had worried that it was all just a game between wealthy families, that she was just a pawn. But the look in Julian's eyes was not the cold dominance of Ethan. Instead, it was an undisguised, intense affection that she found overwhelming. So she finally asked the question. Why? Julian just smiled, not answering immediately. He gave a mysterious smile. Come with me to a place, and you'll understand soon enough. After they got out of the car, Clara looked around and realized that Julian had brought her to the neighborhood where she used to live. She had sold the house to pay for her mother's treatment and had never been back. Julian led her to her old house. The furnishings were exactly as she remembered them. It was as if she had gone back in time to when her mother was making dumplings in the kitchen and she was doing her homework under the lamp. She was only 9 then. Though she had no father, her mother's great love gave her all the security she needed. She was innocent and full of hope for the future. Standing in her old house, memories came flooding back like a tide. Clara remembered that her next-door neighbor was an old man with a little boy who was 2 years older than her. They were very poor, and even when her mother didn't have much money, she would help them out during the holidays. The little boy was frail and thin, as if a gust of wind could blow him away. Clara had looked after him like a little sister, giving him a sense of security. Whenever the old man wasn't home and the little boy cried, she would tell him the stories her mother had told her. The little boy lived next door for 2 years before moving away. She never saw him again. Clara trembled. She looked at Julian, and the handsome man before her gradually merged with the little boy from her memories. "You're J.R.?" she whispered. Julian's eyes turned red, his voice trembling, tears streaming down his face. "Clara, you finally remember me." Clara was overcome with emotion. She never thought that after all these years, she would see that little crybaby boy again. She also finally understood why Julian had helped her. As her mother used to say, when God closes a door, he opens a window. Clara had lost her mother and 5 years of her life to the Thorne family. Who would have thought that she would meet her JR again? Childhood playmates, reunited after more than a decade, had endless things to say, endless feelings to share. They talked in the old house until late at night, reluctant to part. Julian didn't force Clara to stay at his family's villa. Instead, he had bought her old house and decorated it just as it had been, hoping to help her heal from her inner wounds. Late at night, Clara lay in bed and closed her eyes. She had the most peaceful sleep she'd had in 5 years. Clara had a beautiful dream. In it, there were only her mother and Julian. There was no more of the dark hell that Ethan had brought her. At that moment, some kind of shackle broke, and she felt as if she had found herself again. Chapter 20. With the Royce family's endorsement, the art exhibition was a great success. Besides Clara's paintings, it also featured works by the left-behind children from the seaside town. Though rough, they were full of hope for the future. During the exhibition, a video showing the real-life situation of these children was played, which garnered sympathy from many wealthy patrons who eagerly bought the artworks. The children became the stars of the exhibition. Clara had no objections. She knew that Julian had organized everything and that the wealthy patrons were simply giving face to the Royce family. But if it meant that more children could be helped, it was a small price to pay. The organizer told Clara that a man had offered $10 million to buy all of her works. Clara knew her paintings couldn't be worth that much. The organizer led her to meet the buyer, and to her surprise, it was Ethan. Since their parting at the cemetery, Ethan had changed a lot. The arrogance and coldness in his eyes were gone, replaced by a cautious demeanor and a sadness he couldn't hide. Clara felt an instinctive revulsion at his expression, as it reminded her of her past suffering. This was the same expression Ethan used to have whenever he missed Isabel. She turned to leave, willing to forego the money rather than have any more contact with him. Ethan called out to her, his handsome face etched with bitterness. "Do you hate me so much that you won't even say a word to me? I know I was wrong. I hope you'll give me another chance to slowly make it up to you." Clara paused, a cold smile on her face. "Parting on good terms is the best way to make it up to me. Do you understand?" Ethan's body trembled, his eyes filled with intense pain. He wanted to approach her several times but held himself back. Sensing Clara's extreme disgust for him, a sharp pain pierced his heart. He thought of the harm and torment he had inflicted on her during their 5-year marriage, and he was only now beginning to understand the pain she had endured. Ethan desperately wanted to tell her that things weren't as she thought. He rushed forward, grabbing Clara's hand, and pleaded, "Clara, don't abandon me." Let go before Ethan could continue, Julian rushed out and knocked him down with a single punch, shielding Clara behind him. The esteemed heir of the Thorne family, who tormented his wife for 5 years for his one true love. And now that they're divorced, he's putting on this ridiculous show of chasing her back. Is this how the Thorne family raises its heir? Ethan's face changed drastically. His gaze shifted between the two of them, a strong sense of jealousy rising in his heart. "This is between me and Clara. It has nothing to do with you. Get out of the way," he snapped. Julian didn't waste any words. He didn't even care about Arthur Thorne Sr., let alone the heir. He ordered his men to throw Ethan out and called the old master, warning him that if Ethan dared to cause trouble on Royce family territory again, he would ensure that the Thorne family's businesses would suffer greatly. Seeing Julian's domineering side, Clara was deeply moved. In the past, Ethan had only used his power and status to torment her, while Julian used his to protect her. Someone who truly cares about you would never want you to be hurt in any way. After the exhibition, Julian held a celebratory banquet to thank the wealthy patrons who had generously donated to the left-behind children. Clara preferred peace and quiet. After making her rounds, she went to the backyard for some fresh air. "What are you doing here?" Isabel came out of the kitchen with a tray, her eyes filled with venom. "Do you know what this place is? Someone of your status has no right to be here," she hissed. She was being driven mad by Ethan's torment, but she had signed a contract. If she violated it, she would have to pay double the compensation. Isabel had thought that with a little manipulation, Ethan would love her again after his anger subsided, so she had endured the humiliation and constantly tried to please him. But it was all in vain. As punishment, Ethan had sent her to work for the Royce family. For the former heiress of the Croft family, this was the ultimate humiliation. She blamed everything on Clara, her resentment soaring. "If you're divorced, then just go and die. Why are you still clinging to Ethan?" Sensing Isabel's resentment, Clara frowned and tried to ignore her. Isabel felt she was being deliberately slighted. Her anger flared. Seeing a nearby fire pit, a vicious thought crossed her mind, and she lunged at Clara. She wanted to use the same old trick, hoping to disfigure Clara's face. Then Ethan would surely come back to her, but Clara was prepared. She sidestepped, and Isabel, unable to stop, fell straight into the fire pit, letting out a horrific scream. Seeing her plight, Clara was reminded of how Isabel had framed her 2 months ago, nearly disfiguring her. She did not go to her aid. What Isabel had done to her then was now being repaid in kind. Chapter 21. When Isabel was taken away, no one cared. Her situation was even worse than Clara's had been. She had severe burns all over her body and was in a coma. Many of the people who had wrongly accused Clara were present, but no one dared to step forward. When Ethan cared about Isabel, she was the center of attention. When he cast her aside like a worn-out shoe, she was worth less than Clara had been. This was the harsh reality of the wealthy elite. Clara just quietly watched the ambulance drive away, feeling no sense of vengeful satisfaction. When Julian heard the news, he rushed to the scene. Seeing that Clara was unharmed, he breathed a sigh of relief, then his face darkened. "That madman Ethan, it seems I've been too merciful with him. How dare he send someone to harm you? I'll make the Thorne family pay for this right now." He took out his phone, ready to retaliate against the Thorne family. Clara stopped him, shaking her head slightly. "It's all right. There's no need." She knew it wasn't Ethan's doing. Not long after the ambulance left, Ethan arrived, looking frantic. He rushed over to check on Clara. "I'm sorry. I didn't know Isabel would do this. It wasn't my idea." Before Clara could answer, Julian slapped him hard across the face. "Isabel is your person. She almost pushed Clara into the fire just now. Ethan, you keep testing my limits. Do you really think I won't touch you?" he roared. Ethan's face paled. Since learning Julian's identity, he had been strictly warned by his grandfather not to act rashly. He could only vent his anger on Isabel, forcing her to work for the Royce family, hoping that Clara would see his change of heart. He never expected it to almost lead to a disaster. Julian gritted his teeth. "How could you not know? The last time Isabel pushed Clara, it was the same trick, and what happened? Clara almost needed skin grafts, and you abandoned your own wife to be with your precious, one true love, Ethan. How can you be so disgusting?" Ethan trembled, his eyes flashing with pain. His body swayed and he kept murmuring, "I'm sorry. but no one cared. After this incident, Clara was in no mood to stay. She suggested they leave. Worried that she might be hurt again, Julian escorted her all the way back to her old neighborhood. Clara knew a little about the rules of the wealthy. She persuaded the reluctant Julian to leave, repeatedly assuring him that she would be fine before finally seeing him off. Standing at the window, watching Julian look back every few steps, Clara smiled and waved at him until the car was out of sight. She then let out a long sigh. In the few days she had been back, she had caused him a lot of trouble. Having spent 5 years with the Thorne family, she knew that the resources of a wealthy family were not a personal tool. Julian's repeated defense of her made her feel guilty, worried that she would implicate him. And she knew very well how crazy Ethan could be when it came to love. She wanted to deal with things here quickly and return to the seaside town, never to come back. She called the cemetery to arrange for her mother's grave to be moved. The cemetery replied that it would take at least 3 days. That meant she had to stay here for another 3 days. Reluctantly, she had to stay, but the thought of never having to deal with Ethan again lifted her spirits. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Thinking it was Julian returning, Clara opened the door without any suspicion, only to see a weary old man. "Clara," he said hoarsely, "can we talk?" She was about to refuse, but when she saw the pleading look in Arthur Thorne S.R.'s eyes, she remembered that night 5 years ago and her heart softened. She stepped aside. The old master politely thanked her and entered the living room. After all, he was her benefactor. Though reluctant, Clara still offered him a cup of tea. The old master held the warm teacup and looked at the girl before him, sighing deeply. Clara's tone was indifferent. "If you've come to plead Ethan's case, I'm sorry, but I've done all I can for the Thorne family. I will not go back. Since we are divorced, it's best we never see each other again." This was her stance. She hoped the old master would not continue to pester her. Otherwise, she would show him the door. Sensing Clara's firm refusal, the old master was not surprised. He was silent for a moment, then suddenly stood up as if to kneel. Clara's face changed drastically, and she quickly helped him up. The old master's face was full of pain, his stooped body looking even older. "It's all my fault. I never should have made that contract. Ethan is my grandson, my only heir. I can't watch him be destroyed. Clara, I'm begging you. You can hate the Thorne family, you can hate me, but please don't hate Ethan. He can't live without you now. I'm not asking you to forgive him, but please give him a chance. Otherwise, Ethan will go mad." Clara was silent. The once powerful head of the Thorne family, who had held her life in his hands, was now groveling before someone he had once despised. The old master had gone to great lengths for his grandson. He was willing to kneel and admit his mistakes just to get Ethan another chance, but that had nothing to do with her. Clara's face was calm, her voice firmer than ever before. "Impossible." Chapter 22. Standing at the window, watching the dejected figure of the old master leave, Clara's face was expressionless. She felt no pity, only a simmering anger. She knew what the old master was trying to do. Since he didn't dare to offend the Royce family, he was playing the sympathy card. But he was mistaken. Playing the sympathy card was the most disgusting thing he could do. Because of sympathy, Clara had signed the gratitude contract, wasting 5 years of her youth with the Thorne family, living a meaningless life and enduring unimaginable torment. Because of sympathy, Clara had actually developed feelings for Ethan. After her mother's death, she had desperately longed for the care of a family. But what had Ethan done? He had treated her as an outlet for his frustrations, bringing her endless pain. And the laughable reason for all of it was that it would alleviate his guilt towards Isabel. It was Ethan's own doing, enabled by the old master's indulgence. Why should she have to bear the consequences? She had been naive back then, foolishly agreeing to repay her debt. Thinking back now, she realized how stupid she had been. What's done is done. And now the old master was trying the same trick again, using her debt of gratitude to force her to stay. Julian was right. There wasn't a single good person in the Thorne family. The old master never considered that Ethan's cold-blooded and ruthless nature was not innate, but a result of his upbringing. The old master was largely responsible for Ethan's self-destructive behavior. Clara was tired of being entangled with the Thorne family. She had made her position clear. She hoped her firm stance would make them stop pestering her. The most important thing now was to move her mother's grave. She never wanted to return to this city full of painful memories. Outside the apartment building, the old master leaned on his cane, walking step by step, ignoring Ethan, who was waiting by the roadside. He walked towards his car. Ethan watched his grandfather's back, knowing the outcome. Tears streamed down his face. The old master frowned, his face full of disappointment. "Look at you now, is it worth it for a man? First for Isabel, now for Clara. If you don't make a clean break, the Thorne family has other options," he snapped. "Grandfather, please help me one more time. I really know I was wrong," Ethan pleaded. The old master laughed, exasperated, and slapped him across the face. "Help you one more time? Do you want to work this old man to death? You were willing to die for Isabel, so I found Clara for you, but you didn't cherish her. In 5 years of marriage, you never once looked for the problem in yourself. Think about the harm you caused Clara over those 5 years. For any normal person, enduring it for a few days would be a miracle. She endured it for 5 years. Do you have any idea what she went through?" The old master had thoroughly investigated what Ethan had done to Clara. It was truly outrageous, inhuman. He had wanted to play the sympathy card, but now he realized that the fact that Clara wasn't seeking revenge on the Thorne family was a testament to her kindness. "You're not wrong. I was wrong." The old master took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky, his expression more weary than ever before. "Your parents died early and left you in my care. I had high hopes for you, but my repeated indulgence has turned you into what you are today." "Ethan Thorne," he turned, his face turning cold. "From this day forward, you are no longer the president of the Thorne family company. Go and work your way up from the bottom. When you've matured, we can talk about inheriting the Thorne family." Without giving Ethan a chance to plead, he got into the car and drove away. Ethan's head spun, and he collapsed to the ground. Now he had lost not only love but also his career. Who would have thought that Clara's departure would have such a massive ripple effect? Regret and pain filled his heart. Ethan was finally experiencing the despair that Clara had felt when she was being tormented by the Thorne family. Chapter 23. The matter of moving the grave was complete. Clara held her mother's ashes, ready to board the train back to the seaside town. Before she left, Julian came to see her off. It was raining lightly that day, as if the heavens were weeping. Leaving the city full of sad memories, Clara felt a sense of relief. Looking at the misty sky, she could almost see the sunset over the sea, and a smile of liberation appeared on her face. Just like 2 months ago, when she had left the divorce papers behind, any place other than the Thorne estate could be a sanctuary for her soul. Now, she planned to settle down in the seaside town for good. Julian didn't go with her. He had a lot to deal with back home. He hadn't told her what he had been through in the decade since they had last seen each other, or whether the old man he lived with was still alive. Everyone has their own story. Clara had her tragic 5-year marriage, and Julian must have had his own bad memories. They had a tacit understanding not to reopen old wounds. The seaside town was a gathering place for lost souls from all over the country. Clara was not the only one seeking healing there. So, this time, she didn't feel lonely going back. In fact, she was eager. Just as Clara was about to leave, a Maybach pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing Ethan's haggard but stubborn face. Seeing his "I'm not leaving until you get an" attitude, Clara was annoyed. Julian stepped forward, a cold glint in his eyes, ready to intervene. Clara hesitated for a moment, then made her choice. She shook her head slightly at Julian and got into Ethan's car. The car started slowly, heading for the train station. They sat in silence, which was the best form of communication between them. Just as they were about to reach their destination, Ethan stopped the car and looked back at the woman beside him, a flash of pain in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I never thought my willfulness would cause you so much harm. I've broken off all ties with Isabel. You'll never see her again." Clara was noncommittal. "That's your business. It has nothing to do with me." His past devotion was now worthless. Ethan seemed to understand that once Clara left, they might never see each other again. Though reluctant, he couldn't help but ask, "Clara, is there really no hope for us? I've thought about it a lot lately, and I finally understand. Isabel was just a lingering regret from my youth. I haven't loved her for a long time. But after you left, I missed you so much I thought I would go crazy. So, I'm absolutely certain that the one I truly love is you. Whether you believe me or not, I don't know how I've survived without you. Maybe this is God's punishment for me." Clara took a deep breath and laughed, exasperated. "Ethan, I thought I had made myself clear, but you're still so obstinate. Are you really sure you love me?" Before Ethan could answer, her voice grew agitated. "You say you love me, but what have you done? You don't know what I like, what I care about. You don't even know what I'm allergic to. And you have the nerve to say you love me? Love isn't what you think it is, it's what you show. You've never done a single thing for me, not even shown a shred of concern. You've never given me a single gift. So don't profane the word love. Because you're not worthy of it." Ethan's face instantly paled. He wanted to argue, but the words were stuck in his throat. Clara was right. In their 5 years of marriage, he had given her nothing but painful memories, no warmth. All that was left was a cold heart. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his head bowed, trying to hold back his tears. Clara had said all she needed to say. She pushed open the car door. A piercing roar of an engine filled the air. The bright headlights blinded Clara, and she instinctively raised her hand to shield her eyes. A car was speeding towards her. Behind the wheel, Isabel's eyes were wild, full of venomous hatred. "Clara Vance, you took everything from me, go to hell," she screamed. In that critical moment, before Clara could react, someone pushed her out of the way. She watched as Ethan was sent flying by the car, his body tracing a tragic arc in the air, his blood scattering like mist, landing on her face. Clara saw the look of liberation on Ethan's face. Chapter 24. Isabel was sent to prison for crippling someone with her car. The Thorne family didn't even need the Royce family's help to ensure she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Ethan's injuries were too severe. He was sent straight to the ICU, and a critical condition notice was issued. Clara had seen his body flying through the air. The look in his eyes was not one of regret, but of liberation, as if to prove her words right. When you truly love someone, you are willing to give everything, even your own life. Just like 5 years ago, when Ethan was attacked by an enemy and Clara had taken 9 stabs for him, nearly dying. Perhaps the Clara of that time had loved Ethan, but she didn't love him anymore. The Ethan of today understood the true meaning of love, and he had paid a heavy price for it. But Clara was not moved. She didn't go to the hospital with him. She walked straight into the train station. It wasn't that she was cold-blooded. It was that the past harm had made it impossible for her to feel any pity for him. For the man who had caused her endless pain, the most she could do was to restrain her hands from clapping and quietly walk away. As the train started to move, a heavy rain began to fall, shrouding the entire city. Sitting in the train car, Clara sent Julian a text message to let him know she was safe, then closed her eyes. She held her mother's ashes, leaving the city of sorrow behind. Everything will eventually pass. When the train pulled into the station in the seaside town, she stepped out of the car to be greeted by warm sunshine and a dozen children waiting eagerly at the exit. When they saw Clara, they all rushed forward to hug her. Clara's lonely heart was filled with happiness. She stroked their little heads, her eyes welling with tears. Perhaps this was the meaning of her staying in the small town. Ethan had spent 5 years bringing her endless pain, but Clara had used that pain to encourage and motivate herself, hoping that there would be less harm and more love in the world. She was willing to spend the rest of her life working to help these children. Time flew by, and another 6 months passed. Clara gradually fell in love with this slow-paced life. During the day, she was a volunteer teacher for the students. In her spare time, she would paint by the sea. She loved to paint the seagulls at sunset because they represented freedom. Returning to her courtyard, Clara subconsciously glanced next door. Julian, that little crybaby boy, still hadn't come back. Perhaps, being from a wealthy family, he was not his own master and had too many worries. Besides tending to the plants in her own yard, Clara would also help take care of Julian's flowers. They had both planted many sunflowers in their yards. Sunflowers symbolize freedom and strength. Clara remembered her mother's words: live well, live happily, and be a useful person to society. She didn't know if her current life was what her mother would have wanted most. She didn't know if she could become a useful person to society. But her heart was full, except for the absence of a certain person next door whom she was beginning to miss dearly. The world is so big. Clara didn't know how to describe her feelings for Julian. She seemed to understand his intentions, but was afraid of repeating her past mistakes. She didn't dare to ask for too much. She could only let nature take its course. The weather was exceptionally clear that day. The warm sun spread across the sea. Clara put down her drawing board and dipped her feet in the seawater, swinging them back and forth. It was the first time she had been so close to the sea, and it felt even more wonderful than she had imagined. She closed her eyes, enjoying the peace in her soul. When she opened them, a figure was standing before her, dressed in a white shirt, with a warm, gentle smile that warmed the heart. Their eyes met. Clara smiled, and Julian smiled too. Many things didn't need to be said. They both knew what was in each other's hearts. Julian held out his hand in invitation. Clara took his hand, and they walked along the beach, enjoying the quiet happiness. Behind them, the flowers in the courtyard bloomed, facing the sea with spring blossoms. Happiness will come naturally.